Mark's fist slammed against the glass table so hard I thought it might shatter. "Kendall, just admit you screwed up the entire deal." His voice echoed through the conference room, bouncing off the windows that let everyone on the fourth floor watch this public execution. My stomach dropped as 30 pairs of eyes pretended not to stare while absolutely staring. The speakerphone crackled with static, then Richard Donovan's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "I want to know why you ignored every single document I requested and why your employee has been cleaning up your mess for 3 months. Gasps rippled through the office outside. Mark's face turned from red to white in seconds. My throat tightened, hands shaking as I stood frozen against the wall. This was it, the moment he'd been building toward for months. But Mark didn't know something. Something crucial. My finger hovered over my phone in my pocket, where I'd been recording everything. The client already knew the truth. I'd made sure of it. I tapped the speaker icon on my phone, amplifying Richard's words. "Mark, I'm done with your lies." The room went silent. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Kendall Price, and this is how my boss tried to destroy me to save himself. 6 months earlier, I sat in the monthly strategy meeting watching Mark Ellison work the room like a conductor leading an orchestra. He stood at the head of the conference table, expensive suit perfectly pressed, gesturing toward the presentation on the screen behind him. My presentation. Every slide, every data point, every strategic recommendation came from 3 weeks of my research and late nights. "As you can see," Mark said smoothly, clicking to the next slide, "we've identified a significant opportunity in the Midwest market." The executives nodded, impressed. My direct manager, Patricia, glanced at me with something like pity. Mark continued for 20 minutes, occasionally gesturing in my direction with phrases like, "My team helped compile this," and "We worked on these numbers." When the CEO finally asked a technical question, Mark turned to me with a practiced smile. "Kendall can explain the specifics." I stood, answered precisely, then sat back down. Invisible again. After the meeting, Mark caught me in the hallway, placing a hand on my shoulder, like we were old friends. "Great work back there," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Stick with me, and you'll go far in this company." I forced a polite smile, but something cold settled in my chest. This wasn't mentorship. This was ownership. 2 weeks later, Mark called me into his office. The door clicked shut behind me, and he gestured to the chair across from his massive desk. "Kendall, I have an opportunity for you." He slid a folder across the polished wood. Inside were preliminary documents for the Donovan account, the biggest potential partnership our company had pursued in 5 years. "This could be career-defining work," Mark continued, leaning back in his leather chair. "Richard Donovan is particular, demanding, but if we land this, it changes everything." My heart raced. This was exactly the kind of project that could prove my worth, show leadership what I could do beyond being Mark's shadow. "I want you leading the groundwork," Mark said. "Research, documentation, client communication. All of it." I nodded, already mentally organizing the workload. "But Kendall." His tone shifted, became almost fatherly. "If you blow this, it'll follow you forever. This industry has a long memory." The warning felt less like concern and more like a threat. "I understand," I replied. "I won't let you down." Mark smiled. "I know you won't. Remember, I'll be overseeing everything. Final approvals come through me." As I left his office, folder in hand, I didn't realize I'd just been handed all the responsibility with none of the authority. The first month on the Donovan account consumed my life. I stayed late every night, researching Richard Donovan's company, analyzing market trends, preparing comprehensive strategy documents. Richard responded quickly to my emails, asking detailed questions that showed he actually read my proposals. For the first time in months, I felt valued. Then Mark started sending revisions. Every document I prepared came back with track changes that erased my strategic recommendations and replaced them with his own ideas that often contradicted what Richard had specifically requested. Richard asked for a phased approach," I said one evening, standing in his office doorway as he edited my latest proposal. This aggressive timeline isn't what he wanted. Mark didn't look up from his screen. I've been doing this longer than you, Kendall. Trust me, clients don't always know what they actually need. But he was very specific about, are you questioning my judgment? Now he looked at me, eyebrows raised. I swallow my argument.
No.
Just clarifying. Good. Send this version. The next morning, Richard emailed asking why we'd ignored his timeline requirements. I stared at the message, trapped between contradicting my boss and losing the client's trust. I forwarded Richard's concern to Mark. His response was immediate. Handle it. Tell him we'll adjust. 3 weeks into the project, I arrived 15 minutes early for a scheduled video call with Richard. I'd prepared talking points, updated slides, everything we needed to address his concerns. I logged into the conference room system and waited. Mark didn't show. At exactly 9 o'clock, I called Mark's cell. No answer. I texted. Call with Richard starting now. Where are you? 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I called Richard, apologizing, explaining there was a technical delay. That's fine, Richard said, though I heard the irritation in his voice. Is Mark joining us? He should be here any moment. But he wasn't. 20 minutes later, Mark finally called me back. Sorry, something came up. Can you handle it? My jaw clenched. Mark, this is a critical meeting. Richard has questions about the strategic approach. You know the material. Just don't commit to anything without running it by me first. The call ended. I returned to Richard, professional smile in place, and conducted the meeting alone. Richard asked pointed questions. I answered carefully, aware that any misstep would be blamed on me. After we finished, I documented everything in a detailed email to Mark. 2 hours later, Richard emailed me directly. Kendall, I appreciate your clarity and preparation. It's refreshing to work with someone who actually listens. That afternoon, Mark appeared at my desk. We need to talk. Mark's office felt smaller this time, the walls closer. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. I heard the call with Richard went well, he began. It did. I sent you my notes on everything we discussed.
Right.
Here's the thing, Kendall. He leaned forward. I need you to loop me in before responding to Richard directly. I'm the point of contact on this account, not you. I blinked, confused. But you asked me to handle the call when you couldn't make it. I asked you to manage it temporarily. That doesn't mean you start making decisions independently. I didn't make any decisions. I presented the options we'd already discussed and documented his preferences. Mark's expression hardened. Don't go above me again. Every communication with Richard runs through me first. Understood. I wanted to argue, to point out that he'd missed the meeting, that Richard had specifically thanked me for being responsive. Instead, I nodded. Understood. Good. You're doing great work, Kendall. I'd hate to see ambition damage your reputation. As I left his office, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger I couldn't express. My phone buzzed with a missed call from Richard. I stared at it, then at Mark's closed door, trapped between following orders and doing my job well. The following week, Mark began a new pattern. In every team meeting, whenever I spoke, he interrupted to clarify my points. What Kendall means is, he'd say, then rephrase my exact words as though I'd been unclear. During one particularly important strategy session, I presented updated projections for the Donovan account. Before I finished my second slide, Mark cut in. Let me jump in here. Kendall's numbers are solid, but the interpretation needs context. He proceeded to explain my own analysis, occasionally glancing at me as if checking whether I understood my own work. Patricia caught my eye across the table, her expression sympathetic but silent. Nobody challenged Mark. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, Mark called back. Kendall, quick word. I stopped at the door. We can't afford rookie mistakes on this account, he said, voice loud enough for the stragglers in the hallway to hear. I know you're learning, but precision matters. I've been precise, I replied evenly. I'm just making sure everyone knows the stakes. He smiled, but it felt like a warning. That evening, I stayed late again, triple-checking every document, every number, every comma. At 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed with an email from Richard. "Kendall, quick question about the timeline revision. When can we discuss?" I stared at the message, then at Mark's dark office. I wasn't supposed to respond directly, but Richard deserved an answer. I responded to Richard's email carefully, copying Mark, keeping my reply factual and brief. Within 30 minutes, Richard wrote back, again addressing me directly. "Thanks for the quick response. Honestly, you've been the most organized point of contact we've worked with. I appreciate it." Something warm bloomed in my chest. Recognition. Actual appreciation. For 3 months, I'd felt invisible, incompetent, constantly second-guessed. Richard's simple acknowledgement felt like oxygen. I forwarded the email to Mark with a brief note. FYI, Richard responded to the timeline question. No response. The next morning, I arrived at my desk to find a meeting invitation. Mark's office, 9 a.m., door closed. My stomach knotted. Patricia walked by, noticed the invitation on my screen, and winced. "Good luck," she whispered. At precisely 9 o'clock, I knocked on Mark's door. "Come in." He didn't look up from his computer. I sat, waiting. Finally, Mark turned his screen toward me, showing my email exchange with Richard. "We talked about this," he said quietly. Too quietly. "You copied me on everything." I followed protocol. "The protocol is that I handle Richard directly. You provide me with information and I communicate it." But Richard emailed me specifically. It would have been rude not to respond. Mark's jaw tightened. "Stop going above me. I'm the point of contact. Not you." The emphasis on you stung. "Understood." I managed. As I stood to leave, Mark added, "I'm trying to protect your career, Kendall. These clients are complicated. You're not ready for that level of relationship management yet." After that conversation, something shifted. Mark began excluding me from client calls, telling Richard the first was working on back-end documentation, when really I was sitting at my desk, fully available. He stopped forwarding me email threads, then acted surprised when I didn't know about decisions that had been made. One afternoon, Richard emailed me directly again. "Kendall, why haven't you sent the competitive analysis we discussed last week?" My heart stopped. I immediately searched my inbox. Nothing. No request from Richard. No forwarded email from Mark. No mention in any meeting notes. I replied carefully, "I apologize for the confusion. I don't have a record of that request. Can you forward me the original email so I can prioritize it immediately?" Richard's response was terse. "I sent it to Mark 6 days ago asking him to route it to you. This is the second time information hasn't reached the right people." I checked my sent folder for anything related to competitive analysis. Nothing. I looked through every shared drive, every project folder. The request had never been forwarded to me. I walked to Mark's office. He was on a personal call, laughing about something. He saw me, held up one finger, then turned his chair away, continuing his conversation for another 5 minutes while I stood in his doorway. Finally, he hung up. "What's up?" "Richard says he requested a competitive analysis through you last week." "I never received it." Mark frowned, typing on his computer.
Huh.
"Must have slipped through the cracks. Can you get on it today?" "Of course. Can you forward me his original request so I understand exactly what he needs?" "Just do a standard competitive analysis. You know what those look like." "But, Kendall, we're behind. Just handle it." I returned to my desk, opened a blank document, and started writing. At 11 that night, I finally sent the analysis to Mark for review. He didn't respond until noon the next day. "This isn't what Richard wanted. Redo it." The mistakes multiplied. Documents I'd saved suddenly weren't in shared folders. Emails I'd sent according to my sent folder apparently never arrived. Meeting times I confirmed in writing changed without notice, making me look disorganized when I showed up at the wrong time. Each incident was small, explainable, deniable. But the pattern was clear. One morning, I arrived at work to find Richard had left me a voicemail at 7 a.m. "Kendall, I'm frustrated. I've asked 3 times for the revised budget breakdown. Your silence is concerning. My chest tightened. I'd sent that breakdown twice, both times with read receipts confirming Mark had opened the emails. I checked my sent folder again. The emails were gone. Completely gone, as if I'd never sent them. My hands started shaking. I opened my personal email, where I'd started BCCing myself on every important message as a backup habit I developed without fully realizing why. There they were. Both emails sent to Mark, clearly labeled with subject lines Richard had specifically requested. Someone had deleted them from my work account. I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the screen, understanding crystallizing into something cold and certain. Mark wasn't just taking credit. He was actively sabotaging me. And he was doing it carefully, methodically, in ways that made me look incompetent while he positioned himself as the competent manager dealing with an unreliable employee. My phone buzzed. Mark. My office.
Now.
Mark's expression was grave when I entered. Patricia from HR sat in the corner, notepad in hand. My stomach dropped. Kendall, we need to discuss some performance concerns, Mark began, his tone measured, almost kind. Patricia looked uncomfortable. There have been several instances of missed deadlines and incomplete deliverables on the Donovan account. That's not accurate, I said immediately. I've met every deadline. Mark slid a printed email across the desk. It was from Richard, dated 3 days ago, asking where the quarterly projections were. Richard says you never sent these. I sent them 2 weeks ago. I can show you. I've checked the shared drives. They're not there. Because they were deleted. The words came out harder than I intended. Mark's eyebrows rose. Are you suggesting someone is sabotaging you? I'm saying there's been miscommunication somewhere in the process. Patricia wrote something down. Mark continued, voice gentle, almost concerned. I understand the pressure of a high-stakes account. It's a lot for someone at your level. But we need reliability. I have been reliable. Every single deliverable has been completed on time. Then why does Richard keep asking for things he claims you haven't sent? I had no answer that wouldn't sound paranoid. The meeting ended with Mark's warning. If this deal falls apart, we'll have to reevaluate your role here. I left his office and went straight to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and let out a breath that felt like a scream. That night, I sat at my kitchen table until 2 a.m., going through every email, every document, every interaction from the past 3 months. I organized everything into folders on my personal laptop, sorted by date, creating a timeline of what I'd actually sent versus what Mark claimed I hadn't. The pattern was unmistakable. Every time Richard praised my work directly, a mistake would appear within days. Every time I communicated efficiently with the client, Mark would suddenly need to correct something. I created a simple spreadsheet. Date, what I sent, what Mark claimed, Richard's actual response. The evidence was clear. But evidence didn't matter if no one would listen. At work the next day, I started documenting everything in real time. Screenshots of sent emails with timestamps. Read receipts showing when Mark opened messages. Calendar confirmations. Every conversation, I followed up with an email summary. Per our discussion today about X, I'll proceed with Y. Building a paper trail Mark couldn't erase. During a team meeting that afternoon, Mark announced, unfortunately, the Donovan account is hitting some friction. We're working through communication issues. Everyone glanced at me. I said nothing. After the meeting, Patricia pulled me aside. Kendall, I don't know what's happening, but be careful. What do you mean? She glanced around, lowered her voice. Just document everything. Everything. So, I wasn't imagining it. Someone else saw it too. That evening, Richard Donovan emailed me directly, and this time his message was different. Kendall, I need to be frank. I'm getting conflicting information from your team. Can we schedule a private call? Richard's voice was calm but firm when I called him from my car during lunch. Kendall, I'll be direct. I've been working with Mark for 3 months, and I'm not seeing the competence he promised. You, on the other hand, seem to understand exactly what we need. I gripped my phone tighter. I appreciate that. So, why is Mark sending me half-completed work and blaming you for delays? My breath caught. What do you mean? Last week, he sent me a budget proposal. It was missing 3 sections I specifically requested. When I asked about it, he said you'd failed to include them. But I have emails from you, Kendall. Emails with those exact sections sent weeks ago. Tears burned behind my eyes. Richard, I don't know what to tell you. Tell me the truth. What's happening on your end? I sat in my car, staring at the office building, weighing my options. If I told Richard everything, I'd be going around Mark, violating every corporate hierarchy rule. But if I didn't, this deal would collapse and I'd be blamed. Richard, I've sent you everything you've requested. Every document, every analysis, every timeline. I have proof of every email, every deliverable, with timestamps and read receipts. Then why is Mark saying otherwise? I think that's a question you should ask him directly. Silence. Then, thank you for your honesty. I'll take it from here. After the call ended, I sat in my car for another 10 minutes, hands shaking, knowing I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. My phone buzzed. Mark. Conference room.
Now.
We need to talk about your unauthorized client communication. The conference room felt like a courtroom. Mark sat at the head of the table, Patricia beside him, both wearing expressions of professional concern. Kendall, Richard Donovan called me very upset, Mark began. He said you've been making accusations about the team's competence. That's not what happened. He asked me direct questions, and I answered honestly. You told him I was sabotaging the account. I never said that. I said I'd sent every document requested and that I had proof. Mark's jaw tightened. You're undermining my authority with the client. That's a serious problem. I'm trying to save the account. Richard was about to walk because he thought we were incompetent. No, Kendall. Richard is concerned because you've created confusion about who's responsible for what. This is exactly why I said all communication should go through me. Patricia shifted uncomfortably, writing notes I couldn't see. I forced my voice to stay steady. I have timestamps for every deliverable. I can prove everything I've claimed. That's not the point. The point is you went around me, damaged the client relationship, and put this entire deal at risk. The meeting ended with a formal warning documented in my file. Failure to follow chain of command, unprofessional communication with clients, creating organizational confusion. I signed the paperwork with a steady hand, then returned to my desk. An email from Richard was waiting. Kendall, thank you for your honesty. I'm requesting a full team call tomorrow with both you and Mark present. I want to understand what's really happening. I forwarded it to Mark. He read it, his face going pale, then called Richard immediately. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I watched through the glass walls as Mark paced, gesturing emphatically. When he hung up, he looked directly at me, and I saw something new in his expression.
Fear.
Mark became frantic. For the next 2 days, he scheduled constant check-ins, asking for updates every few hours, reviewing documents he'd previously ignored, suddenly very interested in every detail of my work. I need to see everything before tomorrow's call, he said Wednesday morning. Every document, every email, every piece of communication with Richard. I spent the entire day compiling everything into a comprehensive folder, organized chronologically. Every email I'd sent, every document I'd prepared, every timeline and analysis. The evidence was damning if you knew what to look for. Mark took the folder and disappeared into his office. At 6 p.m., he emerged looking exhausted. Kendall, I think we should present a unified front tomorrow. Show Richard we're a coordinated team. What does that mean? It means we both acknowledge there's been miscommunication and commit to better processes going forward. But the miscommunication wasn't on my end. Mark's expression hardened. Are you interested in saving this deal or being right? I wanted to scream that I could be both, that the truth mattered, that months of sabotage shouldn't be swept under miscommunication. Instead, I said, I'm interested in transparency. Transparency can happen after we save the account. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing out tomorrow's conversation in my mind. Mark would control the narrative, smooth over his failures, probably blame me subtly while appearing magnanimous. And I'd be expected to nod along. Unless I didn't. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop and composed an email to Richard.
Just the facts.
No accusations, no emotion, just a clear timeline of what I'd sent and when I'd sent it. I attached read receipts, timestamps, copies of documents. I wrote, Richard, in preparation for tomorrow's call, I wanted to provide complete documentation of all deliverables from my end. I believe in transparency, and I want you to have all the information to make informed decisions. I hovered over the send button for 10 minutes. Then I pressed it. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I dressed carefully, professionally, armor for what was coming. Mark was already in the office when I arrived, pacing near the conference room, checking his phone obsessively. Morning, I said neutrally. He looked up, eyes slightly wild. Did you send anything to Richard last night? My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. I sent in the documentation he requested. Complete timeline of deliverables. Without running it by me first, you said he needed transparency. I provided it. Mark's face went red, then white. Kendall, you have no idea what you've done. I provided a client with factual information about work I completed. That's my job. He stepped closer, voice low. I've protected you for months. Covered for your mistakes. Managed Richard's expectations while you learned. And this is how you repay me. I met his eyes. I haven't made mistakes, Mark. And we both know it. For a long moment, we stood there, the truth finally naked between us. Then Mark's phone rang. Richard Donovan. Mark answered, forcing cheer into his voice. Richard, good morning. We're all set for our call at 10. I couldn't hear Richard's response, but I watched Mark's face crumble. No, I think an in-person call would be better. More personal. Another pause.
Yes.
Yes, both of us will be there. On speaker. He hung up, staring at his phone like it might explode. He wants a speaker call, Mark said quietly. Everyone in earshot. He wants everyone to hear this. At 9:45, Patricia and 2 other executives joined us in the glass conference room. The entire 4th floor could see inside, everyone pretending to work while obviously watching. At precisely 10 o'clock, Mark dialed Richard Donovan. Richard, thank you for making time. Mark began, his voice professionally warm. I wanted to address some of the confusion around. Mark, I'll stop you there. Richard's voice cut through the speaker, sharp and clear. I received Kendall's documentation last night. All of it. And I have some very direct questions. Mark's hand gripped the edge of the table. Of course. Happy to clarify anything. Let's start with the timeline. 3 months ago, I requested a phased implementation strategy. Kendall sent me a comprehensive proposal within 1 week. You sent me a completely different approach 2 weeks later, claiming Kendall had misunderstood my requirements. Why? The room went silent. Mark cleared his throat. I felt the phased approach needed refinement. I was trying to optimize. I didn't ask for optimization. I asked for what I requested. Kendall delivered. You changed it without consulting me. Richard, with respect, I have more experience with. Let me finish. Richard's tone hardened. The competitive analysis. I requested it from you on September 15th. You told me Kendall hadn't completed it. But I have an email from Kendall, dated September 16th, with the complete analysis attached. Sent to you. Why did you tell me it didn't exist? There was a miscommunication in our internal systems. The budget revisions. The quarterly projections. The risk assessment. Every single document I requested, Kendall delivered. And every single one, you either claimed didn't exist or sent me an incomplete version. Sweat beaded on Mark's forehead. Through the glass, I could see coworkers leaning forward, straining to hear. Richard, if there were documentation gaps, I take full responsibility as the team lead. But I think you're not seeing the full picture. Put this call on speaker.
Now.
Mark's hand shook as he pressed the speaker button. Richard's voice filled the conference room, flooding into the office beyond. Is Kendall there? I'm here, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Kendall, I need you to answer something honestly. When I've emailed you directly with questions or requests over the past 3 months, have you responded?
Yes.
Every time. And did you copy Mark on those responses? Every single one. Did Mark acknowledge those responses or forward them to me? I glanced at Mark. His face had gone gray. Not consistently. Not consistently, Richard repeated. Let me be more specific. Out of 17 direct requests I sent through Mark for you to handle, how many reached you? I opened my folder, scanning my documentation. 6. Patricia inhaled sharply. One of the executives shifted in his seat. And the other 11? Richard asked. I learned about them later. Usually when you followed up asking why they hadn't been completed. Richard's voice was quiet now. Deadly quiet. Mark, you want to explain that? Mark's mouth opened, closed. Richard, I was trying to manage Kendall's workload. She's talented but inexperienced with accounts at this level. I was filtering requests to prevent her from being overwhelmed. By making her look incompetent? By claiming she missed deadlines when you never gave her the work. That's not, I never intended. The meeting we scheduled for October 3rd. You told me Kendall was feeling overwhelmed and couldn't attend. Was that true, Kendall? I remembered that day clearly. I was in the office, prepared for the call, waiting. I didn't know it was happening until after it was over. Mark stood abruptly. Richard, this is clearly a misunderstanding. If Kendall's been keeping information from me... Sit down, Mark. Richard's command cut through the room like a whip. I've been in business for 30 years. I know what this is. You've been sabotaging your own employee to cover your incompetence. You've lied to me repeatedly. You've wasted 3 months of my time. And you are going to blame Kendall for all of it. The conference room felt like it had lost all oxygen. Mark sat frozen, his carefully constructed authority crumbling in real time. Through the glass walls, 30 people watched in complete silence. Richard, I've worked in this industry for 15 years. Mark tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. I've closed deals worth millions. If there's been miscommunication, this isn't miscommunication. This is calculated deception. Richard's voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. You withheld information from your own team member, then blamed her when the work couldn't be completed. You took credit for her deliverables and hid her failures that weren't failures at all. Patricia was writing furiously. The two executives exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Every timeline Kendall sent me was detailed, professional, exactly what I requested, Richard continued. Every version you sent me was incomplete, rushed, or wrong. When I praised Kendall's work directly, suddenly she'd make a mistake within days. The pattern is obvious once you see it. Mark's hands trembled on the table. Richard, please, let's take this offline. We can discuss this professionally, just you and me. Why would I discuss anything with you? You've lied to me for 3 months. I was protecting the integrity of this partnership. You were protecting yourself. The words hung in the air, final as a judge's gavel. Mark looked at me, and for a moment I saw him clearly. Not a powerful executive, just a frightened man who'd built his career on taking credit for others' work and finally got caught. Kendall, Richard said, his tone shifting. Yes. I need to know something. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why let this go on for months? I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. Because I was a junior employee going up against my boss. Because I knew no one would believe me without proof. Because I've seen what happens to women who speak up too soon. Silence. Then, you were gathering evidence. Every email, every timestamp, every document. I had to be certain before I said anything, because I only get one shot at being heard. Smart, Richard said, and I heard genuine respect in his voice. You'll go far in this industry, Kendall. Just hopefully not at companies that treat their talent like this. The door to the conference room opened. Nancy Thornton, the CEO, entered with the head of HR. They'd been listening. Richard, this is Nancy Thornton, she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. I apologize that you're learning about internal personnel issues in real time, but I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Nancy. Richard's tone warmed slightly. I've worked with your company for years. This is the first time I've seriously questioned whether we should continue. That won't be necessary. We're addressing this immediately. Nancy looked at Mark. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. Please leave the building within the hour. Security will escort you. Mark's face went from gray to crimson. Nancy, you can't seriously believe. I heard the entire conversation. I have the evidence Kendall provided. And I have 3 other employees who filed formal complaints about similar behavior from you in the past year. Complaints that were buried. Not anymore. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Mark looked around the room wildly, searching for support, an ally, anyone. He found only uncomfortable silence. This is insane, he muttered, standing unsteadily. I built this department. I brought in millions in revenue. You're going to believe some junior analyst over me? Nancy's expression could have frozen steel. We're believing documented evidence.
Leave.
As security escorted Mark from the conference room, he looked at me one final time. I met his gaze steadily. No triumph, no anger, just calm certainty. He'd destroyed himself. I'd simply provided the mirror. The door closed behind him. Through the glass, we watched him collect his belongings from his office, security hovering nearby, 30 employees watching in stunned silence. Richard, Nancy said, returning her attention to the phone, I'd like to personally oversee the Donovan account moving forward until we restructure the team. Appreciated, Nancy. But I have a different suggestion. Nancy raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I want Kendall as my primary point of contact. Not temporarily.
Permanently.
She's the only person in 3 months who's been completely honest with me, delivered exactly what I asked for, and clearly understands my company's needs. Nancy looked at me, evaluating. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs. Kendall's talented, but she's been in this role less than 2 years. With respect, Nancy, experience isn't the same as competence. Mark had 15 years of experience and spent 3 months lying to me. Kendall had the integrity to document everything and the courage to stand up when it mattered. That's the person I want managing my account. Patricia was smiling slightly, trying to hide it. The executives looked uncomfortable but impressed. Kendall, Nancy said, turning to me fully, are you prepared to take on the Donovan account as lead? Not just support, full ownership. Every instinct screamed at me to say yes immediately. This was the opportunity I'd been working toward, the recognition I'd craved. But something made me pause. Can I ask a question first? Nancy nodded. What would the reporting structure look like? And what changes are being made to prevent this from happening to someone else? Nancy blinked, clearly not expecting that response. You'd report directly to Patricia during the transition, then to me once we finalize the new department structure. As for changes, we're conducting a full review of management practices, particularly how complaints are handled. Will the other employees who file complaints against Mark get their concerns properly addressed? Yes. And will there be consequences for whoever buried those complaints? A pause. Then Nancy said, yes. That's part of the review. I nodded slowly, looking at Patricia, who was watching me with something like pride. I thought about the past 3 months, the sleepless nights, the constant documentation, the fear of being gaslit into thinking I was incompetent. Then I thought about my prepared resignation letter, still saved as a draft on my phone. Richard, I said, I'm incredibly grateful for your trust, and it means everything that you see my value. But can I have 24 hours to consider the best path forward? Silence filled the conference room. Nancy's eyebrows rose. Richard laughed, actually laughed. Kendall, you just brought down your boss, have a CEO offering you a promotion, and you're asking for time to think about it? Richard said, amusement clear in his voice. That's exactly why I want you on this account. You're strategic even under pressure. I want to make sure I'm making the right decision for the right reasons, I said carefully, not just reacting to what just happened. Fair enough, Richard replied. Take your time. But Kendall, whatever you decide, I want you to know that you've earned my respect. Not many people have the backbone to stand up like you did. After the call ended, Nancy dismissed everyone except Patricia and me. The office outside slowly returned to normal, though the energy had fundamentally shifted. Everyone had witnessed something rare, accountability in real time. That was an unusual response, Nancy said once we were alone. Most people would have jumped at the opportunity. I need to be sure this company actually values me, not just my ability to save a failing account, I replied honestly. Patricia spoke up. Kendall's right to be cautious. She just experienced months of systematic sabotage. She needs assurance that won't happen again. Nancy studied me for a long moment. What would it take for you to stay? I'd thought about this during countless sleepless nights. Transparent reporting structures. Clear documentation of all management decisions. Regular skip-level meetings where employees can raise concerns without retaliation. And consequences for leaders who bury complaints. That's a significant cultural shift, Nancy said. Then maybe this company needs one. Nancy smiled slightly. Take your 24 hours. We'll talk tomorrow. I left work early that afternoon, something I hadn't done in months. I drove to the lake near my apartment, sat on a bench, and watched the water. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from coworkers, some congratulatory, some asking what happened, some just saying, finally. Patricia texted, proud of you, whatever you decide. My best friend called. I heard through the grapevine. You're a legend. But are you okay? Was I okay? I'd just publicly destroyed my boss's career, exposed months of sabotage, and turned down a promotion in front of the CEO. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt exhausted and strangely empty. That evening, I opened my laptop and reviewed the job offers I'd been quietly collecting over the past month. 3 different companies, all offering senior positions, all impressed by my work on initial conversations. I'd been preparing my exit long before today's explosion. One offer stood out. Whitmore Consulting, a firm known for valuing ethics and transparency. They'd reached out 2 weeks ago after seeing a presentation I'd given at an industry conference. The hiring manager had said something that stuck with me. We don't just want talented people. We want people with integrity. I drafted an email to Nancy, then deleted it. Drafted another version, deleted that too. Finally, at midnight, I wrote something simple and honest. Nancy, thank you for the opportunity. After careful consideration, I need to decline the promotion. I'll stay on to ensure a smooth transition of the Donovan account, but then I'll be resigning. I've realized I need to work somewhere I don't have to fight to be heard. I didn't send it. Not yet. I wanted to sleep on it, be absolutely certain. Friday morning, I arrived at the office to find flowers on my desk with a note from Richard Donovan. To integrity. Whatever you decide, you've got a reference from me. Nancy's assistant approached before I'd even sat down. She'd like to see you whenever you're ready. I picked up my phone, opened the unsent email, read it one more time, then walked to Nancy's office. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Have you made a decision? I have. I set my phone down, showing her the draft email. I'm grateful for the recognition, but I need to leave. Nancy read the email, her expression unreadable. Because you don't trust us to change? Because I shouldn't have to survive sabotage to be valued. Because 3 other employees filed complaints that were buried and nothing changed until a client got involved. Because I'm tired. What if I told you Mark wasn't the only person we're removing? That we're conducting a full review of management across the company. I'd say that's good for the people who stay. But I've spent 3 months building evidence against my own boss instead of just doing my job. I can't do that again. Nancy leaned back in her chair. You know what impresses me most about you, Kendall? You're not trying to leverage this situation. You're not asking for more money or a better title. You're setting boundaries. I learned a lot in the past 3 months. Mostly about what I won't tolerate. Where will you go? I told her about Whitmore Consulting. Nancy smiled slightly. Helena Whitmore is a friend. Good company. You'll do well there. So you understand? I do. I wish she were staying, but I respect her decision. She stood, extended her hand. Thank you for saving the Donovan account and for showing us what we need to fix. We shook hands, and I felt something release in my chest. Relief.
Clarity. Peace.
The next 2 weeks passed in a strange combination of vindication and surrealism. Mark's suspension became a termination after the investigation uncovered 2 more instances of similar sabotage with other employees. The HR director who'd buried the complaints resigned. Patricia was promoted to interim department head. And Richard Donovan's account moved forward smoothly, with me leading the transition to a new team structure that would continue after I left. Coworkers approached me constantly, some apologizing for not speaking up sooner, some sharing their own stories of being undermined. I listened, documented what they told me, and passed it all to Patricia and Nancy's office. If my exit was going to mean something, it needed to create real change. On my last Friday, the team threw a small gathering in the break room. Patricia gave a speech about integrity and courage that made several people cry. Richard sent a video message, thanking me again and joking that Whitmore Consulting better appreciate what they were getting. As I packed my desk that evening, I found the warning letter from months ago, the one Mark had put in my file about unprofessional communication. Patricia had removed it officially, but I kept it anyway. A reminder that documentation matters, that truth requires evidence, that standing up for yourself isn't the same as being difficult. My last stop was Nancy's office. She looked up from her computer as I knocked. All set. All set. I just wanted to say thank you for listening. Thank you for speaking up. We're implementing skip-level meetings starting next month and anonymous reporting channels. Your questions made us realize how badly we needed them. I smiled. Good. The next person who gets sabotaged shouldn't have to spend 3 months building a legal case just to be believed. Monday morning, I started at Whitmore Consulting. The office was smaller, less corporate, with glass walls that somehow felt less like surveillance and more like transparency. Helena Whitmore herself greeted me, walking me through the space, introducing me to a team that seemed genuinely excited to have me there. "We heard what happened at your last company," Helena said as we sat in her office. "Not the details, just that you stood up for yourself in a difficult situation." News travels fast. Richard Donovan called me personally. He said you were the most ethical professional he'd worked with in 30 years, and that any company would be lucky to have you. She smiled. He was right. My first project was consulting for a client who was struggling with internal documentation systems. As I reviewed their processes, I found myself drawing on everything I'd learned from the past 3 months, not just the technical skills, but the importance of transparency, of paper trails, of creating systems that protected people instead of exposing them. 2 months later, I received a LinkedIn message from a woman I didn't know. I worked with Mark at his previous company. He did the same thing to me, but I couldn't prove it. Thank you for speaking up. It validated everything I went through. I stared at that message for a long time, then responded. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And know that your value isn't determined by people who feel threatened by your competence. 6 months after leaving, I heard through Patricia that the Donovan account had expanded, that Nancy had restructured the entire department around transparency and accountability, that 3 women had been promoted to leadership positions. Change was happening, slowly but really. And me? I was thriving, leading projects, mentoring junior consultants, working in an environment where being good at my job wasn't seen as a threat. I didn't wake up with anxiety anymore. Didn't triple-check every email. Didn't live in fear of being blamed for things I hadn't done. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone who wronged you. It's refusing to let them destroy you. It's walking away from places that don't value you and finding ones that do. It's knowing that your integrity matters more than any title, any promotion, any company that asks you to compromise it. Mark's career never recovered. Mine flourished. And every time someone asks me about that period, I tell them the truth. I didn't bring Mark down. I just held up a mirror and let everyone see who he really was. The rest took care of itself. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in such a situation? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.